Hey everyone, my name is Will, and today we're going to be diving into span metrics. We're going to see what they are, how they work, how you can instrument them in your code, and how you can use them to query, create metrics, create alerts, dashboard widgets, and a bunch of other cool things within Sentry. So before we get started, let's see what a span metric is. It's important to note that Sentry does not send metrics from like the browser or your server or anything like that you might be used to with something like Jaeger. Sentry actually just sends key value pairs that are attached to each span. So like a span description with a string value or a shopping cart with a shopping cart value with a number attached. Those numbers and strings can then be queried within Sentry to do things like aggregation and grouping so that you can then calculate those metrics and then set up alerts and do the rest. So span metrics are derived at query time when you run that function, whether that's like P50 or sum or average, and then they're not stored separately from your data. They're just calculated whenever we're running the query. This makes it so that you don't need to pay for any separate storage. You don't need to pre-aggregate metrics or define pipelines or anything like that. It's just super easy and flexible and ready for you to kind of get started. So we have a demo app set up today that basically just has a couple different attributes that we're attaching. We're not trying to, make this vague at all. So it's just super simple. We can select a user tier. We can add a couple products to our shopping cart and press this checkout button. And when we're pressing that button, it's attaching those values, right? The user tier, the shopping cart, the items, it's attaching those values to the span, basically the thing that's happening in your browser, and then sending that back to Sentry so that we can query them at a later time. If I go into Sentry and pull up traces, we can actually start seeing all that stuff coming in. If I click into this trace, we'll see the fully assembled page load and also this e-commerce checkout span that has all that information. It's all right here under trace data. We can see the cart total value, we can see the checkout size, the duration, we can see the user subscription tier and the products that we've been adding, and all of this is attached automatically and fully queryable. So unlike some other tracing products where you can only query stuff that's attached to that absolute top level, you get that full granularity. So if you're doing multiple things in one page, you can attach metrics to multiple different items and multiple different things and build out a much more complex, granular flow as you need. Now, all of this is really nice and dandy, but what can we actually do with that data once it's in Sentry? If we go back to the Trace Explorer, we can now start creating metrics and querying our data. So let's say we want to find cart values from all of our metrics over time and plot that out. So what we would do is we'd say visualize, let's say average of, and then we have it right here, cart.total value. Right? We can see that the average value is like around $200. We can actually plot out multiple things on the same place. So let's say average of cart total items, and then that will be a very different number. It's 0 actually because we're not attaching it correctly. But you can basically add a bunch of different things here and just plot out visualizations however you want. What's really nice is it's not just numbers that we can plot. We can also group by any attribute that you are sending, whether that's the browser that's accessing it, the IP if you have like a couple of things that are constantly pinging stuff, or in this case, let's do user subscription tiers so that we can see how this is broken down across our different plan types. And we can switch this over to a bar chart to make it a little more visual. This is all really nice, but maybe we want to be able to save this query as like an alert or a dashboard or something like that. We can go ahead and click Save As, an alert, and right here we have it all pre-populated. And let's say like we want to send an alert whenever our cart value falls below $100 on average. All that is doable right here. We can even save it as a dashboard widget, and we can open it up in our custom query builder, our custom widget builder, so that we can, fine tune this however we want. And my personal favorite is to save this as a saved query. So say you have like a bunch of things that you're adding up here. Like let's say we want to search for a specific type of span. We can click on Save As a new query. And let's say test query. And now it pops up right here. You can see this little star. So in your saved queries, you can see all the queries that you're creating, the queries that are made by your teammates, and also some of the default ones that we have out of the box. So like say you want to find your worst HTTP requests. You can click that and see how that works. DB latency, obviously the project is only front end, so none of that's going to be going through. But I made another query here that's shopping cart value by tier. Let's go ahead and hard reload this so it populates. You can see that we've built out this whole query that uses, a couple different query bodies. We're visualizing a different metric, and all of this is saved so that we can just pull it up whenever we need. We can share it with our teammates, and we can, customize and save updates to it as we go along. So all of this is pretty swell. Let's see how this works in our code base. So if I flip over to cursor here, we can see that there's two ways that we're attaching these span metrics in our front end page. Again, all of this is done right here in our, in this case, span attributes TypeScript page that's like generating our React front end, right? So here we are doing what's called enhancing an existing span with attributes. This is this getActiveSpan method. What that does is it basically takes the current thing that's happening, whether that's a page load or an asset fetch or a database request, and it's attaching these key value pairs to it. So we have this user subscription tier that we're attaching with this user tier thing that is being selected up here. We have the cart total value, which we're actually calculating right before we send it to Sentry. It's super, super flexible, and it really doesn't take much additional instrumentation to get things going. We also have another way, which is possibly more common, which is creating a dedicated span to attach some of those attributes to it. So this is done with Sentry.startSpan. What this does is it creates a custom transaction span, right, with a name and an operation, and then you can attach attributes to that. This is a really good way to be able to query for specific items like button presses or checkout flows or things that you're doing in your application that are really common. You might want to wrap them in a custom span. Like say a really common way to do this is to have an API routing file, and then you wrap all of those in a start span so that we have, different attributes that are being attached to it, like the size of the API body or the PII parsed JSON object, right? Things like that you can then attach to your spans and then send over to Sentry for querying at a later time. So the typical default is to over-instrument here, right? You want to be attaching whatever you think might be useful because it doesn't really add that much in terms of like performance overhead, and it's really, really useful once you have it all in Sentry since you can query things so flexibly. If you want to give this a shot, it's really, really easy. If you already have Sentry tracing turned on, it's available for you right now. Just pull up our documentation page, which will be linked in the description, and give it a shot.